Recording. So Johnny Blair here. I'm with my dad, Joe Blair. We're going to go back in time to the glory days of football when we didn't have internet. Match of the day was once a week, and you'd be lucky to catch a match on TV. You'd be listening to the radio, and we're going to sort of look at the transition between the 60s to 70s. Obviously, glorious era of George Best, and then the Brazil team from 1970. But my dad was playing football. So, so Dad, when sort of distillery in Dunmurry wreck, when did that come to an end? What sort of year was that? 69,
Well,
70?
yes, went back to the Murray in '69,
Mm-hmm.
and then in 1970.
Is it recording? I'm just checking. Sorry, just checking.
In
Yes, recording.
1970, I joined. I started working for BT, and I went on day release. Why that's significant for football is Bill Black, who was one of the other students on the course up at Queen's at the ISB Institute where we were studying electrical engineering. He, even though he was only slightly older than me, was the manager of second Bangor Old Boys, an Old Boys team from Bangor, from the Epworth Hall down at Hamilton Road. And I became friendly with him, and we used to play in the break at uni. It was uni, but it wasn't uni. It was day release. We're at university, but it was day release. And we actually transferred to the University of Ulster. And basically, what we did, I played football at the breaks. It was an open area in the University of Ulster, and he said to me, "Who do you play for?" And I said to Mary Rack, and he says, "Is there any chance you come to second Bangor?" And I says, "Well, not really. I play for the Murray Rack, and my girlfriend's from Bangor."
Oh, lives in Bangor at the time.
Lived in Bangor at the time, and so he says, "Well, if you joined us, you could play all your home matches in Bangor and go and visit your girlfriend and your mother after the matches." So I made the amazingly, looking back, it sounds like a silly decision to go from 1A in the amateur league, where I was playing every week for the Murray Rack, to joining second Bangor Old Boys in the third or fourth division.
Yeah.
So it was a big difference in the level of football.
Yeah.
And I don't really regret that, because I was a small part of their journey towards becoming Bangor amateurs. And by the time they became Bangor amateurs, I played for them for a couple of seasons. At that stage, I had wrecked my knee, but prior to that, I played for two other teams.
Right, so tell us about those two other teams.
Yes, well, I was ironically on day release also with Jim McMillan, whose brother Sammy McMillan played for Manchester United in Northern Ireland, and Jim played for the ICL, who were International Computers Limited, who were down at Sydenham, just where Sydenham Station is. There's a football pitch there.
Oh, is that the
There's a
one
changing
on the
room.
same side as the Oval?
Yeah.
I know that one. Yeah.
And so Jim coaxed me. I think I left second Bangor temporarily. I'm not sure why, because I was very happy with them. But whatever happened anyhow, there's no ill feeling. I played for at least one season for ICL in the amateur league, and we actually reached the cup final and won a cup. I can't remember what cup it was, but I played in that team. And then, because I was working BT. BT had two things. There was BT, who were an amateur league team, who I played a bit for on occasion, but BT Northern Ireland was the BT team that played all the other regions across the UK.
Yeah.
So I was privileged to play in that team and represent BT Northern Ireland for several years. And some of the players of note who played for BT Northern Ireland was an amazing guy called Davy Mills, who died a few years ago. He was a brilliant player who played for Bangor Ards and was Northern Ireland Youth International. He was one of the best footballers I ever seen, who never made the top grade.
Right.
But also, although I didn't know him. As I was fading from that with injuries, Mal Donegal came in, but before that I played alongside Trevor Anderson, and I remember playing one day in Stoke, and we beat Stoke Foams about 4-1 or 5-1. And Trevor and me scored all the goals between us, and he was playing for Portadown at the time. And shortly after that match, Manchester United signed him.
Yeah, Trevor.
Trevor Anderson. He
Incredible.
played for Manchester United.
Yeah.
And although he was a couple of years younger than me, there wasn't a lot in it.
Yeah.
And so I played on and off for BT Northern Ireland.
This match was in Stoke, Dad?
Yeah, I had two other experiences on that front, which one of them was not a good experience, but I'll tell you both of them. We were playing Manchester Foams.
In Manchester?
In Manchester, and played on about 3 occasions. The most significant occasion was we played them at Stalybridge Celtics ground,
right,
on a heavy, cold, glowy, rainy afternoon.
Yeah.
And we beat them 1-0, and Davy Mills scored a goal from about 25 yards.
Yeah.
And we were always the underdogs in those games. They were always.
Because you're away against an English
But they were always
side.
very fit teams, and some of their
Yeah.
players played in various, probably English conference and things like that.
Yeah.
Probably not the highest level. But on one of the 2 occasions I played at Manchester Foams, it wasn't the Stalybridge one, it was the one before that. We were playing in like a sort of open area ground, like sort of playing fields was more than one pitch.
Right.
It was actually a Manchester City training ground.
Right.
And at the match was Malcolm Allison and Stanley Mortensen, who famously played in the 1953 Stanley Matthews final.
And he scored England's first ever World Cup goal, I believe, in history.
Well, that's a very interesting point. But what happened, Malcolm Allison was at the match, and about halfway through that match, I got the ball about 20-30 yards out, and probably hit, for once, an exceptional shot, and cracked the crossbar and was cleared. And we then went to the Manchester City ground, and to this day I don't know where it is, but of a napkin signed by Malcolm Allison, and he brought us into his office. He was in Manchester City, and they were in the first division. They were a big team then. And this is what he said to me. We come in, this is true, we come into his office, and we're all starting, all the Northern Ireland BT football team, and he looks over at me and says, if you'd scored that, I'd have signed you.
Yeah.
That's what he said. He actually said that to me. Now, obviously, it was a joke, and he probably wouldn't have signed me.
Well, who knows?
But I hit the crossbar at that moment, if you see what I mean.
It's a fine line between goal and no goal.
And success and non-success.
And failure, yeah.
And then my worst experience ever was playing against the Leeds Foams. And in the first half, a ball came out from our goalkeeper, one of those big looping balls, and it hit the top of my head, and that's the last thing I remember.
No, not yet.
And I woke up, but I had Dad take me off, but I was in hospital then for 3 days,
Leeds.
and I didn't know who I was.
In England?
In Wakefield
Scary,
Mental Hospital.
Scary experiences.
Hospital for head injuries.
What age was that? You'd have been about 22 or?
Maybe slightly older.
Right.
Maybe
So that's,
24.
we're talking like early 70s here.
But what they had to do, they had to send the general manager from Northern Ireland called in with Muriel. In fact, I think we were in Troutback, so that would have been about 73.
70s, yeah.
Yeah, I was in Troutback.
Right,
so I was as young as that. I was about 23, 24.
I want to ask about construction. Now, the reason is construction. I know about the word construction because when I was a kid, in our flat, in our home, in our house, there was always a newspaper cutting of the day that you were written about in the newspaper about construction, about scoring. I think it was a hat trick in a cup game, and one of them was a bullet from 30 yards, and it's written in the, I've actually got it. And that's the construction.
The construction was a football team that played in the BT Summer League.
And you're in that one as well. You're in that one as well, Dad. That's you there.
Yes, and we won the cup. Construction was actually linked to telephone exchanges.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the construction industry.
Yeah, it was construction A. Is that because there was a construction B as well?
Yeah,
right. So, I mean, those are vintage football photos. That just looks like, textbook classic, 70s foot. What year was that? Do you any idea?
That would have been about 72, 73.
Yeah. He's got the full
And
team.
the strange thing is,
Right.
Frankie McPolan played
He's
for
on there.
Lisburn Foams.
Yeah.
His brother John McPolan was one of Crusaders' most famous ever players, and Frankie knew me from my time at Crusaders.
Yeah. And there's also Bill McCarran. Do you remember
Bill McCarran was a very fit guy who was actually a javelin thrower and played and represented Northern Ireland.
And also the famous Frank McGee, who we know.
This is Francie McGee, my
Yeah.
great friend.
So Francie played. Would he have been a centre back or
Left back?
Left back, yeah. No, that's a great one. So that construction thing, you were sort of playing for two teams at the same time, is that
Well, that
right?
was the summer league, you see.
Summer league.
So it was outside the normal
Yeah.
main winter league. You know.
And then, so now you've signed for what was called Second Bangor. What was the transition between Second Bangor and Bangor Amateurs? It's the same team, but why are the different
Bill
names? What
Black's
happened then?
ambition was that Bangor, Second Bangor, would come out of the Old Boys League and get their own ground.
Right, which they have now, of course.
And he was instrumental in that.
Yeah.
My disappointment in all of that was it was at the same time as I severely damaged my knee. And Bill said to me years later that it was at the Valentine's playing field, playing for Second Bangor, that I fell awkwardly and it sort of took me off for a few minutes and they put me back on.
So basically,
and he said to me, I shouldn't have put you back on. He told me that.
So you played the rest of the game with an injury?
And I tried to play normal with it, and I made it.
These days it wouldn't happen, probably.
Of course, I'm getting a knee replacement.
Yeah. So was that the cartilage operation, or was that a different
It was a
one?
cartilage operation, yes,
Yeah.
and I was in and out of Musgrave Park.
You must remember the year of that one then, would it be?
Yes, I do, because I was 33, 34 by then, you see.
So you're talking 73,
the operation, but it happened before that.
Right.
No, when eventually the operations came years later.
Right.
So I was 26 when that happened. So that would have been.
So you were 26 when the operation?
No,
or the
when the
injury?
knee went.
75 then?
Yeah.
Right. So,
but I played after that.
That's what I'm going to ask. So after that, how many months or weeks were you out when you had that operation?
I probably stopped playing football for probably months and months, and then.
So not a full year, no, not quite.
Maybe it's hard. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But the thing about it was, I knew that my knee would never be the same again, and I never played at the same level after that. That's a fact.
Yeah, no, you've told me that before. But when you did go back into an 11-a-side match after that, can you remember who it was for? Was it back for Bangor Amateurs again?
It was back for them, and I sort of played for their second team for a while. I was in and out of the first team because I wasn't personally at the level I wanted to be at.
Yeah.
Although I played occasionally, but I played quite a lot of what you would call North Down League for their second team, because physically with my knee I wasn't able to play well enough.
Okay, and actually when I think about the Bangor Amateurs one, because I've seen you play for Bangor Amateurs quite a few times, I've been at the match, I was a spectator, you know. I've been to obviously the home one, I've been to Ards, I've seen you play at Malile, at Ballywalter, and quite a few grounds. I think probably in East Belfast, quite a few games I would have been at. So with Bangor Amateurs, were there any other teams sort of in the 80s or 90s, apart from 10th Bangor, which we'll talk about, but are there any other teams apart from that you were actually playing for, 11 aside?
Yes, there was a couple. I played for an under over 35s team.
Right.
Around about the early 1990s. And that was in.
I think I watched it.
That was in Ards Rugby Ground.
I remember that because I think
Peter Dornan,
yeah.
Peter Dornan, who played for Bangor on Sheffield Wednesday, organised it, and he played at the back, and he was like me. He had bad knee injuries, and stuff like that. And so I played in that. And then whenever.
Was there a name of did that team have a name? Can you remember?
I can't remember.
I
know who played in that league, and he was amazing, and he was a lot older than me. He was Billy Humphreys, Coventry and Northern Ireland. He
Right.
played in that summer league.
Right.
And
Okay.
people like Mark McGackie, who were
Yeah.
Irish League players.
Martin McGackie or Mark Cackey?
Mark Cackey, I
Mark
think it was.
Cackey. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do remember that. That was quite a good tournament. That was played over a series of nights or weeks, wasn't it? It was more than one.
It was
like
summer
a few-
evening,
summer evening,
evenings,
every
and Stephen
Tuesday.
Dumigan played in that.
Yeah, and yeah, I remember that quite well because we would be at the sideline kicking the ball about with the boys,
Yeah,
you know.
I took you over with me.
Oh, and Colin Walker, my friend, him and I, we played a few games in a few like sort of
So Colin was
kids
with
games.
you to watch those
Oh,
matches?
Colin would have been there at that point. So yeah, and then after that, you know, obviously I started playing. Obviously not on anywhere near your level, but I started playing for 10th Bangor. It was the junior section, and then my second appearance would have been for the B team. And so when I played for the B team, my first manager was you.
Yes,
You were the
that's
manager.
true.
And do you remember anything about like the early '90s when you would? Because I remember you would manage that team in the morning, and then you'd actually play in the afternoon,
That's
probably for
true.
Bangor amateurs when you made the return.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, how different was it to go from playing into managing?
Well, you know, I was very fortunate because apart from my experience managing teams in the BB, you know, I went on to manage the younger BB teams over a period of nearly 10 years with the great Morris Williamson.
Yeah.
And so I suppose some of the highlights of that, I think that was very fulfilling because you were helping young people develop their football skills as a coach. But I do recall playing in a match with you actually.
Yeah, and I remember that vividly. It was I know when it was. It was either February or March 1999.
Really?
And it was at Bloomfield playing fields, yeah, because you were centre half or say right half, and I was shoved in at right back.
Four.
We only had 10 players, and
Yeah.
on the day either Mark Willis or Nicky Dunseith or Darryl Freeland called me and said, "Can you play?" I said, "Yeah," and they said, "Well, the only position not filled is right back," so they shoved me in at right back. Played with you. I think it finished 2-2.
Yeah,
and
we didn't lose again.
Yeah, and I missed a chance to make it 3-2, and Darryl or someone said to me, "Your dad would have stuck that in the way," and he was right, of course. So I remember that, and then obviously all through all that time. So we'll do just a few quick fire questions. What was the best stadium that you played at in terms of like prestige and looking good, and that you
Probably Windsor Park.
right? And what was the stadium that you preferred to play at the most? Like if you had to choose one stadium that
I think I preferred the Oval.
Right.
I played in a
George
final
Wilson, yeah.
at the Oval, but on top of that, which you know, I actually met with this lovely fella a while back, about a year or two back, the great Billy McCabe, who
Yeah.
played for Glentoran in Northern Ireland. And when I left Distillery, I met Billy actually in a corn market in Belfast one day, just by coincidence. And he says to me, "What are you doing?" And I says, "I'm back with the Murray and all that." He says, "Would you not come down to the Oval?" And believe it or not, because I had lost my confidence with my experience at Distillery, I thought, "Oh, I couldn't go to anything."
Yeah.
But he invited me down because in those days, senior players at the Oval, if they brought a younger player down, who I was probably about 4 or 5
Yeah.
years younger than Billy, you know, they would have been given a chance.
Yeah.
So if I'd won football regret,
Was the Glen seconds would it have
It's
been in
that-
those days?
well, you would have started there, but that's the level I was playing at.
Anyway.
But I was
yeah.
still young enough. I was only about 20. I was still young enough to maybe be with a bit of luck, maybe you know, improve and make my way at that level. But look, these things happen, and I have no regrets really.
What was the worst, not pitch, but just worst ground that you played on more than once? So, I mean, like you dreaded going there, or you thought, well, that's always a bad luck ground. Was there any place like that?
No, but there was a few quaint things. I mean, quite a lot of experiences there. As a very young person, I remember losing 14-0 at Rathcoole on a very heavy pitch to a
There must have been some
very
superstars in that other
very
team.
tough team. But I also remember playing at Dundella's Hen Run for the Murray and beating East Belfast, who shared the ground.
Okay.
East Belfast played at Dundella's ground in those days, and I used to go to Chimney Corner, which had quite a large support, 200 or 300 people, which for amateur league was
Back in those days.
and they loved to shout at you, and it actually inspired you. They didn't realise that, and hurling abuse at you from the touchline, it actually made you play better.
Yeah.
I remember that particularly, and obviously the Valentines, because the years with second Bangor, I played with Billy McCoubrey and Stephen Dumigan and Alistair Scott and Carl McCartney and quite a few other really, Malcolm Carey, and so, you know, in those days in second Bangor, before they became the amateurs, just at that point, Billy McCoubrey was a brilliant player, and I was fortunate enough to play one season or so with Billy, and Billy ended up signed for Bangor and then had several seasons at Linfield, and in fact played for Duncannon Swifts as well later. So that was the football we played was well above Old Boys League level, because the team was exceptional, and I think we got promoted through the Old Boys League.
And through all of these years playing, Dad, who was the best player that you played in? Now I'm going to break it into two questions: in the same team as, and secondly against. So who was the best player that you played in the same team as, in your opinion?
I think Davy Mills, I mentioned earlier. Davy Mills
what was his main clubs he was at then? Do you remember?
He was Northern Ireland Youth International. I met Davy first, it's hard to believe, at Night Tack at Belfast Tack, the old rock, you know, the old rock courts opposite the Victoria Centre. You know that old building there, and his mate was Brian Hamilton, and they both played for the Irish Youth International team, and they were 2 or 3 years older than me, and so Brian was playing every week for Distillery, and of course became a very famous footballer in Northern Ireland, Everton player, and playing for managing the Northern Ireland team. But Davy was very modest, brilliant footballer who scored goals, he could run with the ball, he was good with the head, he was fast, and of course he played Irish League, partly he played for Ards Rangers, I think Cumber Rack he played for, but he should have been at a higher level.
Right.
I don't know what prevented him.
And what about, I know you mentioned that you've played against the Northern Ireland Select or the Northern Ireland squad at the time. Is that too obvious that is the best player you played against? Would have been one of those players, or was it?
Well, because that was like what you call a friendly practice match.
They all count, right?
What surprised me about that match is that the level wasn't higher.
But maybe they were taking it easy or something?
Well, it was friendly in that sense, and wouldn't say it was played at a pedestrian pace, because we were trying to beat them, and they, for their prestige as Northern Ireland, wouldn't want to lose to a Crusaders team. So it was quite a competitive match, and Bertie Peacock refereeing that's a match. But that match only is vivid because it was against my favourite team, Northern Ireland, and some of my heroes were playing. Yeah.
Were Northern Ireland wearing green that day and Bruges in red and black? Yeah. So it was normal kits. Yeah.
It was.
Did you ever? Now I don't know, because you did have a lot of football shirts when I was a kid. Did you ever get to keep your shirts or swap them or anything? It was a different era, wasn't it?
So you never got keeping kits like for teams like Distillery.
You passed them on to the next player, right?
Well, the club owned those shirts,
right,
but a lot of the teams I played for, Ravenhill United, for example, we all had to pay like 50p a week to be in that, and you got your kit and you kept it.
Okay, right.
It was your kit to keep. You know, you got it washed, you didn't hand it in.
Yeah, you had to wash it yourself.
But one of the most bizarre things I recall was at Demurray, because that was the first time I experienced a communal bath, because they had not showers, well, they had a couple of showers, but they had this huge stone
bath,
concrete bath, tiled, that the players all went into after the match at Isley Park, and that was a new experience, especially being 16, and most of the players were 28 to 35.
Right.
So I was certainly the only teenager at that point.
Yeah.
on their team. In fact, I don't remember, apart from Raymond, who was 18, any other teenagers in the team.
Yeah.
You know, I always ended up feeling I was the youngest in
But
those
who was
days.
the standout player like that you played against? Like against?
Standout player.
I mean, you said
I,
Dugan earlier.
well, obviously, if you take all those professional players that I managed to play against, it's hard to tell that. It's a very difficult question.
You mentioned John Hill. I mean, he played in the World Cup.
Well, John Hill I played against a few times, but that was, I suppose, before he was, I wouldn't say before he was really famous with the Greens, but that was.
What about the likes of Sammy McIlroy? Was that after you? That would have been.
No, I wouldn't have played. I played with Trevor Anderson,
Yeah,
who was
Anderson,
an amazing player. I
Yeah.
mean, I could see that he had the hairstyle of George. He was a flying winger, outside left, he had clever feet, he had a great left foot, and you could see that he had class.
Yeah.
You know, he definitely was a person that was going to succeed, and he was a clerical assistant in Churchill House in Belfast when he went to Man United.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
I can't think of anything else, so maybe we'll chat again.
That's great. Okay, thanks for that.